I'm T.S. Murphy. I've lived in Teaneck, New Jersey for over 18 years. I've been a teacher at Teaneck High School for 14 years as a member of the Fine and Performing Arts Department. I'm fortunate to share a creative, sacred space with a lot of beautiful young people who bring their lives, culture, and belief into my classroom. And I'm thankful that they feel safe enough for me to share who they are. That is one of the things I love about living in Teaneck. It's a beautiful picture of diversity. So you can imagine my shock when topics of racism, white privilege, and colorism come up for many people. People who rather not discuss or address these issues. People who want to maintain a picture of diversity without discussing the elements that make it diverse. I've been a man of color my entire life, so I had to deal and live with these issues. So I choose not to ignore them in and out of the classroom. I created the Mosaic Project to talk about these issues and the many beautiful things and parts that make the whole of Teaneck. I wanted to create a format to express individual beliefs, values, and culture. I wanted to show the value of the individual voice and the importance of listening and learning from each other. To understand who we are not only in Teaneck, but America. Ubuntu, an African humanistic philosophy built on recognizing the humanity in others. When that happens, we replaces I. It's understanding that if I diminish someone's humanity, then I diminish my own. Especially at this time in history, I want to be part of recovering the humanity that I feel this country is losing. The following people were willing to share their lives and humanity with me. All that I ask you to do is listen. This is the Mosaic Project.
My name is Sean Holland. I am 33 years old. I've been teaching for about 7 years. I am multiracial, multicultural. My mother is Sicilian and Puerto Rican, and my father is Irish.
Yeah. My name is Shay Lewis. I'm a resident of the township. I identify as Black.
I am Javalda Powell, and I am African American, of African descent.
Well, I'm Cassandra McDonald. I am the mother of Laura McDonald. I just like to think of myself as an individual who is desiring to model what it is to be a role model in society, I guess you would say.
My name is Amatula Muyiali. I am a filmmaker, writer, producer. I am a beautiful African-American woman, or Black. I graduated from Teaneck High School in 2013 and Montclair State University in 2017. That's me.
My name is Damian Campbell. Culturally, I'm Jamaican. Both my mother and my father were Jamaican. I don't have a lot of detailed knowledge about my ancestral background, but I do know I have some, bit of Indian, being West Indian, in me. So.
My name is Pedro H. Valdez III. I am Cuban American, first generation born here. My father is considered a Black Cuban and my mother is considered a white Cuban. So there was always an inner dichotomy in terms of how I saw myself or where I fit. And growing up in Teaneck, there weren't many other Cubans. So I sort of had to find my own path.
I'm African American, and people have mistaken me for all kinds of other things. But I'm brought up as my mother was from Blacksville, South Carolina, and my daddy was from Florence, Alabama, and we practiced all of the good things that Black people do, and I'm still doing that. Got 4 kids, 11 grandchildren, a wife for 60 plus years, and a wonderful life to look back on.
So I am Joseph Nathaniel Tamaris. I identify as Hispanic Dominican. If race is always a weird thing, but I guess African American Black, because Hispanic is kind of just a weird gray area in general. So we just that's where we fall up, I guess, because we're not Asian and we're not white. So it's just okay, what's left? So that's me.
Race, background, culture.
My name is Yusra Subhani, and I identify as Asian American, specifically Indian, and I'm also Muslim.
My name is Kayla Mero. I am 18 years old. I am a Filipina American woman.
My name is Rachel Lendner, and my ethnicity, I think of my ethnicity and my religion as sort of one and the same. I am Jewish, and I think part of the reason that my ethnicity is so intertwined with my religion is that I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor, and so that very much shaped his identity, which therefore very much shaped my identity. And so I think of myself as a Jewish person, and yes, of course I'm white, and I recognize that there are a lot of things that go along with being white, and I don't deny that, but when I think of my identity and my ethnicity, it's all tied into being Jewish.
My parents, my father worked, my mother stayed home, but my father cooked and my mother didn't cook. So like a lot of the roles that we traditionally would have assigned one way or another were shared. And we didn't really strongly identify with any culture or any real norms. So my parents are kind of hippie children. So we were encouraged to express ourselves. There wasn't a whole lot of restriction on what we were doing or when we had to be home. So we were sort of left to raise ourselves. But we didn't really strongly identify with any culture. My mother doesn't speak Spanish or Italian. My father only speaks English. So it was just kind of this unidentified kind of place. We didn't really strongly identify as any one thing.
My father's very well educated. He skipped middle school in Cuba, was accepted to Harvard, went to Stony Brook, went to Middlebury, went to NYU, went to City College, many masters, he never finished a PhD, but he was very close to it. My mother, on the other hand, was finished school in 5th grade. So education was very important in my house. I hated school. School and I just did not get along. I was more into athletics, but he always pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. It was a point of contention amongst us because he was so well-versed and well-educated, and I was always having a little difficulty just trying to keep a light to him or to be similar to him. And then so I just sort of try to go the other way and say, all right, I'm going to be a jock, and then you could have the education and I'll take the jock. But we found a happy marriage somewhere along the line, many years later. But that was the battle, the struggle.
Well, my cultural and racial background is I'm Black Hispanic, so I am bilingual. My dad's Puerto Rican, my mother is Black. I grew up in Brownsville, East New York. I actually lived in Puerto Rico for 3 years, so I am familiar with the culture of, not just saying that I'm half Spanish, but I've lived in Puerto Rico as well.
What is race in your opinion? Race is...
I don't know what race is because I don't see color.
Well, see, being a little scientific, I understand that the only difference between people is their blood type. People evolved from different regions just like plants do, and just like little insects and animals do. If you ever watch a cricket in Atlanta is green. You look at a cricket here and they're black.
It's funny, I almost mix race and culture together because I always think of it in terms of geographic location. In a country in Africa, you would have predominantly black people. So that's race, but I look at it as in a cultural situation because most countries have a multiplicity of background people. So I look at the culture rather than the color, rather than nation of origin, because once you're a generation or so past your family's birthplace, you've acculturated to a large degree to your current environment. So it kind of breaks down.
Race is who we are, how we determine ourselves. It's not just a skin color, it's like more in our culture and our enriched heritage, like what we bring in.
Race to me is a state of mind. Once again, white, black, doesn't make a difference. I believe that races aren't born, they're bred. So they're at home, and if they're taught to hate someone else, or have hatred in their heart, that's what it is. So race to me is a mindset. It's not a color.
Nobody in America looks at anybody in America without first identifying them racially. And then if you do a good job, you do a good job. But the first thing you have to do, that we're taught and we teach our children, when you come into a big room, you got to identify the black ones, the Jewish ones, the African American ones. You just have to do that. That's a cultural requirement that America lays on its people.
Race is really just, I think it's focused on too much. I think race should be more about who you are as a human being. Why do I have to be different because I don't look like you or someone else?
Race is, in some ways, a man construct, because I really do believe in the saying that there's only one race, the human race. Now, I think that God's been creative, you know, in our skin tones and the different things that have emerged. We're not going to ignore those things that they exist, that, you know, colorblind, no. We find a way to celebrate it, but I think we've used it as a dividing tool as opposed to something that can bring us together.
A multicultural society where you look at people because this one is a teacher and that one is a minister and that one's a cop. You look at them first, you got to identify what's their ethnicity. And if you can't do it, and sometimes you can't, you remain uncomfortable for a good period of time.
Socio-political construct used to separate people, to put one group above another group, to make sure that people who are in power remain in power. I believe that race is a thing outside of the United States, but I do feel like the United States puts a whole other spin on it. Still, you know, outside of the United States, people who are in power want to remain in power. And I think they still use that thing of race and color, makes it easier to categorize and keep people in a certain place outside of the United States. But I feel like within the United States, it's a whole system that was built based on that.
Race is complicated. Race is unnecessary. I mean, I think the way we use it as a label, or the way we use it to, if we're using it to separate people, it's unnecessary. If people are using it as a standpoint from a pride perspective, I think at that point, yeah, you could make the argument that it's necessary, but like the way we use it, the way people often use it, I don't think is the way that we should be using it. So I guess misused could be in that definition as well.
But race is in everybody's face. And what I mean by that is not only is it the first thing that you see, but it's always evident. And if people want to speak about it or they delve into it, it's not a very comfortable subject for many folks, but it's always evident. No matter where we go, no matter what we do, at least as a person of color, I don't have a second chance to make that first impression when you see me. You already have these ideas of who I am or what I do just from me entering a room.
It's your training as an American. You are taught to identify people first, not about how good they are, but what they are.
What is race? It's tricky, because culture is the thing. Culture is something that you bring it with you from your family, you inherit it. Race feels like a thing that we've made. And it feels like race is often used not so much to celebrate who we are as much as to separate people and put them into categories.
Race is what a person calls themselves, what they accept themselves as being. and you're required to put yourself into a category. When all of us go to Europe, the Europeans see you as an American. You know, and later on they may try to figure out what particular ethnicity. But you're a foreigner and you're an American. But in America, it's important for people to figure out, is this guy black? Is he Muslim? Is he Jewish? Is he what? And I'm not sure that's a particularly healthy thing. But I don't think we're going to ever get away with that, get away from that. That's how we go.
My children are the same way as me. They don't see color. And they're the most politest people you ever want to meet in the world, because what's I see in America that's most disturbing to me is Americans that aren't polite. Now, when we go to Europe, they call us dirty Americans. You know why they call us dirty Americans? Because the second we open our mouth, we offend.
I became really aware of being African American when I was in the 5th grade. And I was living in Irvington, and most of the students in my school were African American. And so on one side of Irvington, it was predominantly black. On the other side, predominantly white. And so what the district decided to do was create magnet schools. And one school that they created on the other side of Irvington was for foreign languages, and they created another school for the performing arts. So my mom said, hey, you know, you're doing well, why don't you go to the school for foreign languages? And I'm going to learn French, and I'm going to go to Paris, and all of this wonderful stuff. Well, the first day, getting on the bus and going there were people outside picketing. They didn't like this whole thing. They forced integration of their schools through the magnet program system. And so I experienced firsthand people saying, no, we don't want you here. And actually on that very first day, and I remember this very clearly, end of the day, a boy, white boy, spit right in my face as I was about to leave the building. Now, my memory of this, I have a memory of me as a little girl with this big boy. So he could have been a student there, but I felt like he was big enough to be like a high school person, and really feeling unwanted and hated that much that you're gonna come and spit in my face on my way out of school. So that was when I'm like, I'm definitely black and definitely unwanted here.
The first time that society identified me for what they saw me as was probably in about 3rd grade. So in 3rd grade, I grew up in Englewood, and Englewood is a lot like Teaneck in the sense that the community itself, it's a spread, but the school district doesn't look like the town. So there's a point about 2nd grade, 3rd grade where all the white people disappear. They all take their kids out of the school, and we were the last white family left in the school. And in 3rd grade, I remember that was the first time that I got picked on for being white. I was the only white kid in my class at the time, and I got beat up on the playground, and my 3rd grade teacher, to his credit, he forced the discussion when we came back in. We had been in school with each other since kindergarten, so we had grown up together, but as the dynamic of the town changed, the kids, they picked up on some of the tension that was created. And it might have been just the things their parents said, it might have been the things that were said in the town, and so that tension kind of found its way down into our group. And I remember I had my friend Julian Goodridge, who I'm still friends with today, and he was sitting next to me, and my teacher at the time was named Mr. Brown, and he has since moved up to be like the assistant superintendent of schools in Englewood. And he said, we're gonna have a discussion about race in 3rd grade. And he was like, Sean's the only white one in the room. And I got real red. But he asked us to look at each other and to ask questions. And so, you know, my friend Julian noticed that, you know, if you poke my skin goes from pink to white real hard. And then I noticed that, you know, his skin is brown, but when you turned it over, like his skin on the other side is a totally different color. And it was this moment where he created a space where we were allowed to ask questions And they are just the most innocent questions that kids ask, like the texture of hair, the way your skin looks, the way, just lots of things that are obvious, visual. But because he created a space where we could have that conversation, it took something that could have been a disastrous moment for me, which was a time where suddenly I felt like I didn't belong, and he made it an opportunity for us to talk about how we were different, why that didn't matter, and just sort of like the strengths that people of different cultures have when they recognize that they are different, and what they also bring together.
That incident taught me that I had to prove something. And so through all of my experiences, it's always been trying to prove that whether you want me or not, I'm here, and that I have something to contribute. And I think that's a part of my drive, because I'm a very driven person, very goal-oriented, achievement-oriented, and I think that experience had a lot to do with that.
The first time that something happened that identified myself as being different was probably more race first than even Cuban, because I'm not white and I'm not black, but I consider myself, because my father is of darker skin, I always had to make a choice. Was I going to consider myself white, but I can't call myself white because nobody that sees me thinks that I'm white. So I always said that I was a black Cuban. And then I would have to go through a story and explain why I considered myself a black Cuban. But the first time that I saw race was probably, I didn't even really, there's nothing that sticks out when I was younger, growing up in Teaneck, because Teaneck was very diverse, and we didn't see color for the most part. And I was sort of brainwashed that I didn't realize there was a difference until I had probably an interaction with the police on Cedar Lane. And they pulled us over sophomore, junior year, and they said we fit a description. And then after that, race was evident. There was another interaction in Hackensack, and there was some choice words because the gentleman that I was driving was African American and drove a BMW and had a Harvard sticker on it, one of my former classmates. And the police officer just didn't believe that it was his vehicle. So race played a big part when I became a teenager, more so than being Cuban, because Cuban had to come out of a conversation. They always painted me as Dominican or Puerto Rican. Cuban was the last choice.
I think that mostly happened with me identifying as Muslim. I would say about in 5th grade, this kid came up to me and told me that my family bombed the Twin Towers. And before then, I had no idea what that meant. In that moment, I was like, what is he talking about? So I went home, I did some research, I asked questions, and I realized that's what he thinks of me because I'm Muslim. And from that point on, I knew that I was different. I knew that my religion was going to be my identity. People were going to label me, they're going to stereotype me for my faith. That was definitely a moment where I found strength within myself. I didn't let him get away with it. I went to a teacher, I went to the principal, and I got an apology letter, even though I think there should have been more. Anytime something like that happens to one of my friends, I always advocate for them because it's not okay. People can't get away with stuff like that.
I got to see, one, that the discussion could and should be had. Two, it was never a question of being colorblind. Like, we never got to a place where it was like, well, race is, I don't see color. That was never a thing. We recognized that we were different, and as I got older, I was able to recognize the way differences played out. So once I got a little bit older, I recognized that my friends were treated differently as we got older. As we moved around in our community, when we left our community and went to neighboring towns, whiter towns, it made the idea of privilege and the idea of racism, it wasn't a question because I saw it.
Oh, it never came up. Never came up? That was the way it was. My father was an African American, my mom was an African American. You don't question that because it was not an opportunity for making a choice. This is what you are. Okay. And every year, we would go back to Alabama to look at my roots and visit with the relatives and stuff. So there was it wasn't like you had a chance to decide that you wanted to be something else. There was never any question about that.
You know, coming up, I didn't think about it a whole lot. I think when I first came to this country, I was mocked and made fun of and bullied a lot because of my accent and certain questions. But I looked at it more as the meanness of the person or persons perpetrating that behavior more than I looked at it as a racial thing. I think as I started to grow older and started to hear more of these conversations, one thing that really stood out to me was one day when I went into it was a drugstore, I think it was maybe a CVS or so, and I came in and it was a Caucasian lady at the front. She asked me to take off I had a big coat on because it was cold, it was winter, and she asked me to, and a backpack, and I think she asked me to leave my backpack in the front. And I'm thinking, why isn't she asking anyone else in the store to leave their backpack in the front? And for me, at that point, what I thought that, hey, this is the first time I'm really, really facing that I'm aware of racism or prejudice right in front of me. I had always seen it on TV, I heard other people talk about it, but maybe I was just naive in that way. But that was the first time I really said, hey, you know, someone is infringing upon my rights because of the color of my skin.
It was kids around me because, I don't know, it's so weird because when you're a child growing up and people, if they think you're Spanish, they're like, oh, your hair isn't as coarse as mine. Or, oh, your hair is soft. So things of that nature. I mean, those are different biases because, you know, there's such a stereotype when it comes to your skin complexion or the texture of your hair or just your skin tone. So those are a lot of things that play around with you in society.
I think it's different for everyone, for every Black person, but I think within the household, your parents make it very clear, at least mine did, or my father did, what it means to be Black. He was really about Black power and finding other Black people and making sure those are the people you kind of stick with. So being in Teaneck, like let's say I was learning about like US history or something like that. As you guys may know, slavery happened and they teach it in a certain type of way. There was a point when my dad actually took us out of school, like me and all of my siblings out of school so that he could teach us like the triangle trade and the transatlantic slave trade and everything that actually happened and what it did to our people beyond just, oh, this happened, we were working really hard, but it's like, oh no, this shaped how we eat, this shaped how we think, this shaped how we communicate with each other, like our language and everything was taken from us. So now we're here trying to rebuild and reconnect with our original roots. So yeah, I kind of felt like I've always known, but it wasn't until I was actually having my conversation that I understood that it actually meant something.
Well, no matter what skin you're in, you're going to face some kind of adversity resulting because of that. So I think that I just try to be strong beyond that and think that even those people who may be demonstrating that kind of racism or prejudice, depending on how you're looking at it, I think that sometimes kill them with kindness. Maybe if they get to know you, they have to acknowledge, hey, maybe if this Black person's okay, this Jamaican person, this West Indian is okay, maybe there are others who are okay as well. I can't always control, I've been taught I can't control how people respond to me, but I can control my response and my behavior. So I try to focus on being in control of that.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake?
I'm proud that there is a history of, I'm not proud that there's a history of people trying to kill us, but that despite a history of people trying to kill us, we are thriving. And we are people who, I don't want to perpetuate the stereotype that Jews are smarter than everybody else. I don't want to perpetuate the stereotype that Jews have more money than everybody else. One thing that I will say, and I don't know if this is more true than it is for other cultures, but I know that in my culture, education is everything. we are called the people of the book for a reason. I mean, you start with books when you are very little, and we have a great respect for books. A holy book, you don't ever put a holy book on the floor. And if you accidentally drop a holy book on the floor, you pick it up and you kiss the book.
I am proud to be a Black Muslim woman because there are so many titles to it, and then there's so much history to it, and the food is so good.
I just love the food.
We love to eat. That's one of the main things that we bond over, food. And I'm very proud of the food because it's really good.
Well, I love Jamaican food, our spicy food. I love our toughness. I love our straightforwardness, our bluntness.
I think I'm really proud of the fact that all of my family members came here with very little, and they worked really hard, and they were able to build something. And we've all gotten a little bit better and a little bit stronger as we went. So I really am proud of our roots in that way.
I love the language. I love that I'm from a beautiful island that people flock to all the time for vacation.
I love the accent. I enjoy the people. It's just something fun, and they're loud, and they like to dance and have fun.
Like, there is this thing in Dominican culture where, like, you have to be proud that you're Dominican, and I love that. Like, they do not settle. If you don't walk around with the flag, and if you don't have the hat that has the flag on it, and if you don't go to the parades or eat, like, plátano or whatever, like, if you're not doing that, then they get on you, you know? And I almost like that because I'm like, that's the way it should be. That's the way all culture should be, you know? Like, if someone isn't proud of that, you should show them why they should be.
And no matter where I was, I always made it a point to go to like Juma, which is like our Friday prayer in my religion. So the fact that I could go to any part of the world and still have a family or still feel at home is like, it's beautiful because we're all focusing and practicing on the same thing, and it's strength.
What fills me with cultural pride would be celebration of Eid. It's a Muslim celebration, but there's so many like Indian cultural parts of it, like our clothing, our jewelry, makeup, songs and dances, and it's just a beautiful time. My favorite part is the henna too. I feel like that really puts me apart from other people, going to school the next day and just having all these designs on my hands and people being like, what is that?
The extent to which Jewish culture focuses on family life, it's a really beautiful way to raise children. That, you know, every week there's this understanding that you put the cell phones away for a certain period of time and you have a meal as a family, and you know, whether you go to synagogue or you just play games together or whatever it is, like that's ingrained in the culture, that that family matters, and I think it's a very beautiful way of life.
Well, the Filipino people are a very prideful people. We are so proud of our culture and how we are very people-oriented, just like Teaneck. That's why I think that it's so appropriate for me to live here. Like, God put me in this place so I can grow up here and be surrounded by all these people. But yeah, we like to party. I'm proud of that.
What makes me proud of being a Black Cuban, I would say just the perseverance. It's a conversation point for many. It's a joke. Did you come over on a raft? Did you do this? Did you do that? But the fact that, you know, my father came, he was one of the Pedro Pans that escaped Cuba right after Castro took over, and the 10,000 young boys that they sent to orphanages here in the country, and just his story and his lineage and what he was able to accomplish here as a self-made man, not speaking a language. There was no ELL, thrown into a high school, you know, fighting every day. The fact that I have a story to tell, the fact that that is my story, and not only that I share the same name, is powerful.
Have there been any missteps for us?
Even past, present, future, anything.
I think that it would be disingenuous to sit here as a white man and say that there haven't been some missteps. I think that to be an American means that you are living in a society where to be a white heterosexual male puts you in an advantage. It gives you an advantage. in many arenas of life. I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud of the fact that there have been periods of time, and there continue to be many instances where being in the majority, having social political power, it's created conflicts and danger for other people, and I'm not proud of that. That is something that, and I think part of having that identity is recognizing it and acknowledging it. And I didn't play a part in creating that thing, but I live in a world where it exists, and it gives you an obligation to have a discussion about it. And it's one of those challenges where you need to, it behooves you, because you are growing up with that advantage, to acknowledge it and talk about it. And I think that that's important.
The way we treat our men, and I could say that as a boy becoming a man, right? There is an expectation that we don't have to treat women with a lot of respect. There's an expectation that we have to be macho, that we have to have this bravado about us that you see in like the soap operas, you know? No, seriously, like it is a real expectation that that is how those men act, you know, that we have to have like 10 women. You know, the fact that I've been in a relationship with Jordan for like 4 years, and she's the only girl that I've known in those 4 years, and they look at me like an alien for that. You know, they're like, oh my gosh, you should have plenty more girls, and you know, they're always talking about, you know, I'll go out with my cousins, my like guy cousins on my dad's side, and they'll be looking at girls and they'll be like, yo, do you see her? And then I'm like, dude, I have a girlfriend. They're like, it doesn't matter. That bothers me.
I think that would be like all the sexism that exists within Indian culture. It's something I am so ashamed of, because I feel it every day in my life and my family's life. I see it, how women are expected to be housewives and are expected to raise children. And I see it with my own mother when she tells me that if you're not going to work hard in school, you might as well just get married. And when I hear things like that, I'm like, is that really the only path that's available for me?
Specifically the way the men treat the women, and the way the men are, you know, they're always excused for everything. If they're absent from the house, you know, it's oh, he's just, you know, he's a man, you know, women are supposed to be in the house, you know, like he's allowed to do that. You know, if they treat women poorly, if they're absent from the house, things like that, you know. It's just the way that the men are treated in the culture, I think.
Growing up in an Indian family, another thing that I hate is colorism, which is so like infatuated like people are so infatuated with it in my culture. And so at a young age, I thought the lighter skin you had, the better person you were. And that's like my friend who was a little darker than me, who's Indian, her mother would give her skin bleaching at like 11 years old. And I only started realizing how wrong this was until like middle school and like high school. But before then, I'd always believed that the paler my skin was, the more beautiful I was.
I'm not really proud of something that's happening right now in the Philippines. The use of whitening soap and lightening the skin. I think that the Filipino people should be very, very proud of their dark skin and all their different skin tones, because when the Spaniards colonized the Philippines, and you had your light skin, people were so proud of it. Like, just people wanted that light skin so that they didn't get looked down upon in like everyday life. That's why, for my mom, it was important for her to have a daughter that is a little more light-skinned than she is.
It's more like, I feel it towards me and my siblings. Me and my older sister, a lot of people say we look alike, and my older sister's a lot lighter than me, and I'll get that, like, she's like the white child and I'm like the black child. And that always like hits me like, what does that have to do with anything?
And to this day, she still uses the whitening soap, which I've, told her about. I was like, Ma, you don't need to use that. Your skin is so beautiful. She tans gorgeously. So I'm like, Ma, I want that skin, I want this. And she's like, why would you ever want this? Why do you want this so bad? And I said, because it's your roots, it's where you come from, it's who you are.
I don't hold that belief that you're lighter skin, the better you are, because it's not okay, it's not right. It's also incorrect, because you can't judge someone based off their skin color. I think that it's also empowered me to fight against that, which is why I joined my Beyond Diversity Committee to fight against things like racism. I just want people to know that you don't have to be judged by how you look.
I live in Teaneck. I've been living in Teaneck since about 1985. I went to high school here at Teaneck High School. I kind of fought the issue, didn't want to come to Teaneck when my family moved here, and eventually had to come, and then loved it, and I've been here ever since.
Teaneck is cool. I didn't realize how cool being close to New York was, which I'm now realizing as a teenager, being able to go when I want. That's kind of cool. But also the vibe here, the atmosphere here. I'm told it's unique, and I don't really have to leave to know that. You know, the fact that I see diversity here, I saw it at Rutgers Newark too, and then I didn't see it in Montclair, and that's kind of when it hit me. I already knew, but that's when it really realized itself. I was like, wow, we really have a really diverse school and a really diverse town with everybody here. So it's really cool. Cool for me to see.
I moved here, I moved to Teaneck when I was 2 years old from Queens. Moved here not speaking a lick of English. My sister, my older sister, who graduated from the high school as well in 1990, I graduated in 92. I started at Washington Irving School, Bryant School, then went to Longfellow, then went to Hawthorne, then Thomas Jefferson, then Teaneck High School. So this is all I knew in terms of education for the most part. Even my first interactions with other kids in the area were play groups. I had a little difficult time because I spoke Spanish and they spoke English, but we figured out a way through that. But Teaneck this is part of me. This is well entrenched. This is what I know.
We were the first 9th grade class to attend the high school. So from my class going forward, this high school was 9 through 12, and we were that first 9th grade class. Having friends, again, from different ethnic makeup and nationalities, it was, you know, yeah, we noticed the differences, but we also lived the similarities.
My impression of Teaneck would be that it is such a diverse community, and I'm so thankful for growing up in Teaneck. A lot of people call it Teaneck a bubble, and it is, because it's so diverse and so accepting and open-minded. And when you go like out to the real world, like it's harder to adapt because it's not as diverse as it is here. That's what I'm kind of scared of, to go off to college.
And with that exposure of different people, different cultures, being exposed to music all the time. So I liked sound. So sound was something that led me to and brought me to different groupings of people. Okay. You know, and there was a world of diversity where diversity was key. Diversity was attached to your style, to the way you talked, the way you dressed, the way you carried yourself, and it was all about style and presentation and execution under this umbrella of what I refer to as a hip-hop generation.
I think Teaneck does the best that it can for right now. Teaneck's always been a relatively progressive place, and I didn't realize this until I left Teaneck and went to other places. It is extremely separated. They're just, everyone is stuck in their ways, and they surround themselves with people who are also stuck in their ways. So the benefit of living in Teaneck, you have a lot of different personalities. Like when they say Teaneck is diverse, it actually is, even though the people still have their own belief and their own belief systems, you have access to gain more.
You know, back in the early 90s, people who had lived here for 20 years, 30 years, described Teaneck as, you know, parents of friends of ours who said, yeah, you should come to Teaneck. You'll love it. It's very diverse. There's a strong Jewish community, but it's ethnically diverse. And that's what brought us to Teaneck. And my first impressions of Teaneck when we got here was, wow, this is a town that is super ethnically diverse, full of different communities that have nothing to do with each other. And I found that to be very disappointing. I do have to say that that changed once I had a child in the public school system. It's very easy. I will back up for 1 second. So I grew up in a very ethnically diverse school, neighborhood, and I remember when I got to college, particularly at the Jewish Theological Seminary, I had a friend who was the child of a rabbi, and she grew up in Philadelphia. And she had said to me, I've never had a friend who wasn't Jewish. And I said, well, how is that possible? Like, you know, where I grew up in elementary school, I was one of 3 or 4 Jewish kids in my school. And in high school, I was the only one that had ever gone there. And I said, well, how is it possible that you've never had a friend who wasn't Jewish? She's like, well, I went to Jewish day schools and Jewish summer camps. I said, well, yeah, but did you never take a dance class? You never played on a sports team? I don't understand. And then when I got to Teaneck, I totally got it. I totally got it. We have Shomer Shabbos sports teams. You could be on a sports team in Teaneck that doesn't play on Saturday, and everybody in the entire league is Jewish and religious. And if you go to a Jewish day school and a Jewish summer camp and spend your weekends in the synagogue and on the sports team that doesn't play on Saturdays, like my son has never had a friend who wasn't Jewish. So I absolutely see how that could happen living in America, and I was floored by it in college. I had no idea what that meant. So it wasn't until Margot started in the public school system in 5th grade, and that my kids went to Camp Kukuskus, but even so, they were little and they tended to sort of gravitate towards the kids they knew from school, the kids they knew from the synagogue. So it really, although Margot was on a dance team and had a diverse group of friends, but once she was in the public school system and I started interacting with other parents, you know, I realized that this town really, people do have a lot to do with each other.
I was looking at the diversity as far as racially. It was pretty cool to see so many different people, you know, in different positions, students, staff members. It wasn't just one particular predominant race that you were seeing. So I was actually pleased and encouraged to see that. And I thought, you know, hey, I think I might want to be here. I might like it here.
I mean, like I said before, because Teaneck is so diverse and it's so forward about the other cultures that exist inside of Teaneck, naturally people separate things because, you know, gentrification, people are realtors and things like that. They're selling people houses on certain sides of town because people do want to be around the people that they're like, you know, that they have something in common with, like when it's time to, you know, go to sleep. Even though it is a little strange because it's like lower income. That's what the separation is. Because it's one thing about race, but then there's like socioeconomic status, which is disrespectful. But in terms of Teaneck's breakdown, like the first time I went into a Teaneck school, like I let them know, like, yeah, I'm from the black side. Like I made sure people knew. And the first time that I actually went to the white side, I didn't even know that it was still Teaneck. It was so nice. It was so nice, and there were so many hills.
We imagine Teaneck to be this wonderful, diverse community where, well, I don't even know if that's what many of us imagine. What I imagined Teaneck to be when I got here was this diverse community that had this very strong Jewish community and this very strong African American community and this very strong Indian community and a Muslim community. And interestingly, all of those groups I mentioned are all in some way minorities. And it's a community that is really made up of a bunch of minorities. And I had this vision that it was this wonderful place where we all got to know each other. And what it really is people living in silos. There's also quite a bit of resentment from one group to another that I've found troubling over the years.
I think growing up in Teaneck, race and your socioeconomic status, like they correlate, like they ride together. Because even though like on the black side, you have black people, of course, but you also have at least 5 liquor stores on the same block. We have like the only Popeyes in town. Like we have one fruit market and all of the fruit is sour all the time. So, you know, and there's like 6 beauty supplies. So I'm just, you know, like your socioeconomic status is because of the situation that you're in. And it's like you're giving these people ghettos and and not funding them the way they should. So it's very difficult to thrive in a drought, in like a drought. There's no nourishing things there. So, and like I said, when I went to the white side for the first time in high school, and I said that it was nice, it's because there were no liquor stores, or they were kosher liquor stores, which I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't know. They're blessed. It's, you know, like the liquor stores on the black side are not blessed. There was more grass, or kept grass, you know. So there's a big difference, and I think it changes how people feel, and that'll affect how they act. So
I definitely have stories, not in the high school per se, but I remember in the middle school, and it was actually like around now, because there were Muslim students, Muslim girls that I was very good friends with in the middle school that were fasting around now. I went to Thomas Jefferson Middle School here in Teaneck, and so they started fasting around this time of year, I think in 8th grade, and they would have to, during Ramadan, go out at certain portions, go out of class to pray. And I remember hearing something about through Sidra, one of my friends, that there were teachers who, or a specific teacher I think, that wasn't letting the students go out to pray at the time that they wanted to or had to for their, to observe. And so I remember there were other teachers that ended up sticking up for the students and saying, wait a second, Mr. Bianchi in particular, I have to give him huge props, because he definitely stuck up for them, and he said, no, you have to let them do this, because this is a part of who they are, this is a part of their culture, this is their religion, you have to let them practice. He goes, if anything, we should have a space for them, because they're going into the staircase, because that's the only quiet place that they can find during class time. They're sitting there in the staircase on their knees, praying, and it's like, why? You know what I mean? We have a media center where there's a nice carpet in there that they can be comfortable in, a quiet space. Why not let them go in there? And I remember vividly him sticking up for them, and he was riled up. He was very upset. And at the time, as an 8th grader, I didn't understand the full picture. You know what I mean? Because I didn't even understand Islamic culture. I wouldn't understand that until around, actually through 11th grade, when I studied religion and ethics here, that I really understood that culture and how important it is to people. But I remember him being very, I guess, impactful in that he stood up for them in a big way.
I think just seeing our our senior class, our pep rally themes in the past year, we had Black Lives Matter, we had Pride, we had breast cancer awareness. Those things really brought us together, because those were things we cared about. Those were things we were proud to support. And I think that really shows our true colors.
I think as part of Teaneck, like as a disclaimer, I think Teaneck is the greatest place on the planet. Like, I love my town very much. But I think the valuing of money, and I think that's an issue in America in general, money over people, because right now on the black side where I'm from, they're building like luxury apartments, and it's like kicking other people out. Like right now, I'm at that age, it's time to like look for other places to live, but I cannot afford to live in my own town anymore. So I think that when you drain a society of like its artists, which do not make a lot of money necessarily, it's artists, mainly it's artists, and like it's creatives, you limit that town in terms of growth. So when you're not highlighting stuff that's important as creative outlets are, that's a weakness. That's a serious weakness, and the society could crumble.
I think that is to some degree true. I think it's disturbing when I would hear my daughter talk about my neighbor, tell me that her friends referred to our neighborhood as Hebrew Hills. And I think that there is this assumption that in Hebrew Hills is where they have the money. And, as somebody who doesn't come from my daughter's not come from a wealthy family, but maybe we are wealthy compared to other segments of the community.
Where I hosted a screening at my hometown theater, Teaneck Cinemas, and it was for my film. It was called Undefined, a Muslim American Musical. And I was doing like so much promotion, and I was like trying really hard to get people to come. And then we ended up selling out the theater, but it was mostly filled with like people from Teaneck and people I grew up with. But like a ton of Jewish people that were part of the town and actually wanted to hear my story or wanted to hear my musical. They were just open to it. Like one lady came up the day of and asked for tickets, and I'm just like, wow, thank you. So it's just beautiful that Teaneck exists and that I got to be here and that it wanted me to be here. It's not like that guy was infiltrating something.
The Jewish community doesn't only geographically isolate itself. I think there is a little bit of, and not all segments of the community, I think within the Jewish community there is, in general, a bit of a lack of desire to fully integrate into the community. And there are a few reasons. One is practical. If I keep strictly kosher and you invite me to your house for dinner, I can't go. It's not an option. Also, there's a real fear about intermarriage, which as a child of a Holocaust survivor, I get. Jews not wanting their children to marry non-Jews is not about racism. It is not about a feeling of superiority. When I was growing up, it was ingrained in me, you don't date non-Jews, you don't marry non-Jews, because if you marry people who aren't Jewish, the next generation, and certainly the generation after that, is really not very likely to be Jewish. And Hitler worked very hard to annihilate us as a people, and if we intermarry and a few generations we don't exist, we're doing Hitler's work for us. That's a lot of baggage. But when Jews say we don't want our children to intermarry, it's not about racism. It's not about superiority. It's about survival of the people. And so many people have tried to kill us. We shouldn't be annihilating ourselves, but through assimilation.
Teaneck's collective strength, that we care about each other. I saw that with what happened to Dana over the summer. Essentially what happened with Dana and the Trinidad family was over the summer they were in a car accident where Dana and her sisters, essentially the whole family except their mother, had lost their lives, and they were hit by a truck that swerved onto the other side of the road. I didn't realize how much people in this town really care about each other. I thought, that's normal for all towns everywhere, and I quickly realized it wasn't, because of how people who were looking from the outside in responded. I have a lot of friends in Florida because I play a lot of video games online, and so, a lot of friends in Florida. And when they saw what was happening, because they stay on social media and they follow people from around here, some of my friends, they were like, wow, like what, first of all, what happened? But then after that, they were like, wow, you guys really did that. When they created a whole wake for her in Voti Park, that was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen from any group of people, ever. When we came together for the protest against gun violence, and former senators were showing up and people who really could have just easily stayed home. People really care about each other in this town, and I didn't realize how abnormal that was, because there's a lot of towns where that's not the case.
I think the collective strength, I'd go back to that classroom in 3rd grade, right? The idea that it would be a mistake to think that we are all supposed to be the same, because if we're all the same, we all have the same strengths, and that's not true, that's not how the way works. I think our collective strength is a collective experience. Even horrible, terrible atrocities, we have the ability to learn from those things and never do them again. And we only learn those things by having discussions with people whose opinions we don't share.
What makes us strong is that in times of need, we're all willing to come together. The first time I witnessed this was recently, actually, after the New Zealand shooting, the mosques that in New Zealand where people were shot. We had, at my mosque, we had a kind of a memorial for them. And all of these people from the Teaneck community came there, and it was so filled. We had to have the bottom floor too filled. It was amazing seeing all these people come out, and this little boy had a sign, and it said that all the children of Abraham are brother and sisters, and that just hit me, because it's like religion. People say that religion divides you, but it really doesn't. At the end of the day, everyone is willing to help everyone, because at the end of the day, we all bleed red.
I think our collective strength comes from our collective experience. The idea that we all have different things that we've seen and done, and something that you might have grown up just knowing, I might have gone my whole life without ever thinking. And I wouldn't know that or learn that without having a conversation with you. But it requires us to step outside of our comfort zone a little bit.
Our strength is our faith. And our strength, what makes us strong is that we have a belief that we can be strong together. In Teaneck, in particular, I see a strength within us here. The diversity, I think, puts us ahead of other people from other areas that don't grow up with that benefit of getting to know people from other backgrounds. When we are around other people, we get to see how similar we are. And it's not just based on stereotypes or things that we've read about or seen on TV, which we know the media images do a lot of damage as well, especially for African American children and their self-esteem. So.
That's a really difficult question. And the only reason I say that's a difficult question is because nationally we're at such a crossroads right now. We're seeing behaviors that were sequestered, not that they were gone, because people of color know that they weren't gone, but that those behaviors and those attitudes were sequestered for so long and they were had in the back rooms or the back alleys, and now they're coming to a forefront. So in terms of that commonality nationally, that thread that binds us all, I think is now frayed. Teaneck is at a crossroads as well now. Just the makeup of Teaneck is completely different than what it was. The community itself is not. The community itself is what's somewhat segregated, as crazy as that sounds in a town like Teaneck. But that's, for me, comparing it to when I was here as a student and growing up, it's not the same Teaneck. The people that are making up the town are very different, and they're bringing their own cultural identities and their own cultural beliefs, but they're not necessarily at all times blending, meshing, becoming that tossed salad, not that melting pot, but bringing their own identities and coming together and keeping that and making it a culturally diverse town. I think they're more side salads instead of one big salad. So I don't know even if there's a commonality. That's a tough question.
I don't know if we have a collective strength anymore. In theory, it could be how much we have to learn from each other. It could be the fact that most people really are good, and that what we see on the news, it's the extremes that make the news, and the good things happening on a daily basis are not interesting enough to make the news, because that is most of what happens. And so I want to believe that that's our collective strength, that most of us are good, and that most of us don't want to hurt people, and that most of us just want to be making a living and raising our families.
Run the risk of allowing our pride or our strong sense of self to cloud our ability to see other people as people. If I feel so strongly about my culture and my worldview that I can't hear yours, we've missed an opportunity there. So it becomes this balancing act between knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, being proud of who you are and your experience, but also being open to seeing other people's views for what they are and validating those views, and not like shouting down dissenting views, even being able to disagree about things in a constructive way and not feeling offensive or defensive about that. I think that's something we need to work harder at.
I believe there are risks in life, and sometimes it can be risky getting to know different people because you don't know if you feel safe, or if this person is not going to take advantage of you, or are they out for their own gain. So sometimes it's just a matter of, I'm going to put myself out here. I'm not necessarily sure what I'm going to get back, but I know where I'm doing this from. and it's just to get to know people.
The thing that holds us back is that we're more concerned about our membership in some of these organizations than we are about the conditions of our community.
Our collective weakness is inferiority complex, not really understanding our worth, buying into some of those stereotypes of who we should be, not really recognizing that our history doesn't start here in America. Because if we thought our history started here in America, we're slaves. We're enslaved people, okay? We were more than that, okay? With a rich history, culture, languages, civilizations, all of that. When we truly understand that, then we know why, through the slavery system, so much was done to take away from that so that certain groups can be in power and keep power. Okay? If we were so inferior truly, you wouldn't have to do all of that. Mm-hmm.
If African Americans would take the power that they have in the organizations that they have and look out for themselves globally, they'd be an awesome force.
With the technology age, I feel like we're too satisfied with the surface. I don't feel like people, that's why I'm doing this interview, because I feel like it goes below the surface. We're too satisfied with status quo and what seems to be okay, seems to be all right, and we lack substance in our relationships. So I think we need to do a better job of cultivating that.
That's tricky. I'm gonna think about this one.
Think about it.
There's no ability for us to maintain our position in the world if we are not careful in terms of how we treat the rest of the world. And I think that we're in some trouble right now.
I think if we're not careful to keep showing each other how much we care about each other, you know, every time that we show each other how much we care about each other, it's because something had to happen. And I don't think there has to be something that has to happen for us to come together, for us to show each other how much we care about each other, and for us to like stand united, you know, as a town, as a community.
I feel that some of the things that have hurt us as a culture, they're the byproducts of institutionalized racism, of slavery system. Our families being stripped away and beaten down, broken down. This stuff is on purpose. It's done for a reason. And we can't expect that once slavery is over that we wouldn't see any of the residue from it. Not only with the families, but also our languages, the way that we even communicate with each other. It's kind of built in where it didn't suit the slave owner to have us unified. So stripping our history from us, making sure that we didn't know how to read. I mean, that's deep right there. And I always want to bring this to the attention of our students, who I feel sometimes aren't as motivated as they need to be, that there's a reason why it was illegal for us to read. And I feel like it's a slap in the face sometimes when we don't take that seriously, when people have fought and died, for these rights.
Our nation's always in political unrest. It gets pretty violent during election times. There's a lot of killings and different things like that. Structurally, organizationally, for the beauty that we have in our island, I don't feel like we do a good job in those fronts, that we shouldn't be considered a third world nation or anything like that because of all that we have to offer. And so I think a lot of times organizationally, sometimes we lack the structure in our businesses, and sometimes familially, I think especially when we come here, sometimes we don't do a good job of transferring and conveying some of the traditions and the practices that have come before us that help to keep the cultural things going.
A misconception about African Americans is that we all think a certain way. The strength is in our diversity. And I think within our culture, sometimes we group people all in a certain group. Like, okay, because I'm African American, maybe from the South, that I must be like all the other African Americans from the South, and that is just so not true about any people, but definitely not, you know, about us.
So for Latins, for Hispanics, baseball, they're great in baseball. Depending on which Latin country you're from, they're big on soccer. I don't know that to be huge in Puerto Rico, but they do play it. What else? They have great food. I love food from Puerto Rico. Like if I tell my husband I love Spanish food, I don't really think he knows that I love Puerto Rican Spanish food. Mexican food, I'm not that big of a fan, but I'll eat it if it's good. It's just the truth. Certain Hispanic dishes, are just amazing. And then there are others that I've tasted when I moved to Jersey where I was just like, I don't know where this is from, but it's just not where where I come from.
A misconception of the Filipinos is that we don't speak English very well, which is totally wrong, because in the Philippines, English is it's almost the #1 language. It's right there. Tagalog is the first language, and second is English. That's just like that. They learn it in school. And if you walk up to any Filipino on the street, I guarantee that they can respond to you in English.
I think the most real time I've noticed of like misconceptions or stereotypes was when I was younger, because children are just they just hear things and they just go with it. Like introducing myself, I know my name is Big, I'm Amatula Muyi. In middle school they would call me something else, like when my name's Muyi, they call me Mushy or Agui or something like that. And then I'd be like, no, my name is Muyi because I'm Muslim. And that's that's worse, you're a terrorist. And I'm like, it's hard being a kid and being all these things and trying to understand your identity, and being black, oh my gosh, being black as a child in a predominantly white institution, as an adult is difficult also, but as a child, you know how many bar and bat mitzvahs I went to and people were so confused? It was cool, it was lit, they're fun, but they're just hey, what you doing over there? Should these lights be brighter or something like that? When it's the photo booth time, oh, what's this darky doing here?
Oh, that reminds me of when I was a kid. I was asked dumb questions I heard Jamaicans don't like to brush their teeth. Do all Jamaicans smoke ganja? Even they used to say about taking a bath, we don't like taking baths or something like that. Everybody say man all the time at the end of every sentence. If everybody always irie and just free flowing and just carefree, you're gonna find different kinds of people within any cultural group. So it's best for you to get to know the individual.
Miami Vice. That whole fast South Beach, that that Latino is a race, that the people don't understand how Cubans can be racist. And I've seen that. I've seen that in South Florida. That at times you have, especially from up here in the north, many of the Cubans look alike. A lot of them favor one another. If you go down to South Beach or Miami per se, Little Havana, you see of every blonde hair, blue-eyed to dark-skinned, green-eyed to a little bit of everything. And there is that social discourse amongst them, but people just point, you're Cuban, you can't dislike one another, you're both Cuban. I said, well, Cuba's a country. You could say the same thing as the United States. And then that's the conversation that people have no idea that it even exists.
Just like you can find Jamaicans that may use the word man a lot and that have no problem with smoking them ganja man, and sometimes we make those generalizations before getting to know specific individuals. And so that's what I say. Hey, there might be some truth to that. You might find that a lot of them do this or a lot of them do that, but there are ones that don't. or there are ones that don't think like that. So you have to go past those biases and misconceptions, and you have to get to know the individual person.
You know, I do dishes in my house. I vacuum, I clean the bathroom. Like, these are things that people think Dominican men, that other Dominicans think Dominican men don't do. And they think, oh, you know, that's stuff that they just leave for their wives and their sisters and their cousins. And it's like, no, like, there are a lot of us that do it too. That we play baseball, and that baseball is the only sport we're good at. I'm tired of that one, because we make great football players and we make great basketball players, and every other sport on the planet. There's a lot of misconceptions. Oh, and the biggest one that I've gotten is that we are the same as all other Latin cultures. And I think that that applies to Cubans. I think that that applies to Colombians. They lump us all together, and especially in this political climate, with Mexicans. It's like, you're Mexican. And I'm like, no, I'm not. That is a totally different country. It's not even in the same, like, breadth of, there's so many differences, you know? And I think, yeah, in our political climate, the biggest misconception is that we all get lumped together.
Me personally? Yeah. All right, some of the misconceptions about me personally. I always think that it's interesting that whenever we do start to have a discussion about race specifically, there's always an assumption about what I believe. We always, I've had it with a couple colleagues in the past, where we're having the same discussion, but it takes us a couple minutes to realize that we're having the same discussion. And we have to work our way there. There's an assumption that I would be dismissive of the idea of, like, white privilege. There's an assumption that I have a sense of superiority. I have a very stern, sad, resting face. So there's an assumption about my personality and who I am. But I'm okay with that, because it almost creates this opportunity for us to have a discovery and then find common ground, which I enjoy. I mean, yeah, I think it's funny. Before you have an experience with a race or a culture, all you have are preconceived notions, right? Like, you just have what you've heard. You have, and I guess, if anything, I might have, growing up where I grew up, cultures that I wasn't readily experiencing, all I'd have would be my preconceived notions. You have this sense of what your reality is, and then you go out into the world and you test your reality, and you have to be prepared for the fact that you might be wrong, and then reevaluate and reshape it and kind of figure out, all right, I have new information, and reworking what you thought about things and people.
A misconception about other races that are not like us is that they're all the same too. And the fact is, you know, people are people, we're humans. And yes, we're socialized a certain way. Some have certain, I guess, benefits. But we're all human. I think basically we all want the same thing. We want to live, have freedoms, be happy, healthy, be able to raise our kids, to be successful, prosper within the society, be loved, all of those things. So I think we sometimes forget all of that, and we put up these barriers between people, but we're more alike than we are, I think, different.
They work hard. They will sacrifice what they need to so that their family can progress in society. But it's unfortunate that, I don't know, but Americans, and I'm generalizing Americans, not a particular race or anything, there's such an entitlement, whereas they kind of get lazy and not are willing to put in the work for what is needed, and feeling that they're entitled to certain things, not realizing that we all have to work our way up. And when you work your way up, you're able to appreciate what you have.
Just listening to stereotypes probably was a misconception that I held. That's probably at times some of the most difficult, upsetting things that I've probably, not even given into stereotypes, just playing around or listening to them and giving them energy. That especially being from here, I was exposed to a whole different world once I left here, going to a predominantly black college that I never would have imagined. So just the power that some of those stereotypes and innuendos and comments and not necessarily at points in time feeling strong enough to say something or to even act upon something in my younger years. But now that's a point of contention with me in terms of just giving them energy.
A bad one, when you're walking down the street, on one side, you see a tall, hefty-looking black man on this side, and you cross the street because you don't know what's going to happen. But depending on your situation, if you are a woman or a young girl, like a young woman, and you see any male or anything like that coming towards you, you're going to assume that they are going, they might do something to you. They might catcall you, talk to you, harass you because of things that have happened in the past in your life or something like that.
There's a stereotype in Dominican culture that white women are crazy and stay away from white women, and all the men will tell each other to stay away from white women, and it's just kind of a thing that Dominican men look for other Hispanic women, and that's completely just, it's out of, I don't even know where it came from. That's how off kilter it is, in terms of misconception about other races. There are a lot older Dominicans who are inherently racist towards African Americans, and it's kind of something that I never saw it really close, except for with my grandmother in a very specific instance. When she first found out about Jordan, she had put something on Facebook with a picture of us. There was a picture of us, and she had put something in the comments about something, and mi niño shouldn't be with a morena. And, that's kind of that struck me as, whoa. I was like, wow, my grandmother's really racist against, black people. And I'm like, how is that possible? You know what I mean? Because I never saw it that close.
Stereotypes can really tear us apart like that, and just assumptions about a whole race and things like that, and what you're seeing on social media, because not all that's true. Because especially today, we're very electronically dependent, and we see everything on media, TV, movies, film. It's just like McVeary's class. Yeah, and it's just, what is that? Hindsight bias there. That hindsight bias could tear us apart.
Misconceptions I've had, people have always they think I'm really docile because I'm Indian. They think I'm very innocent and quiet and I won't react to what they have to say. Sometimes people just assume that I just will sit there and do nothing if they say anything to me. And this happened at certain occasions. I remember sophomore year, this kid would just say all these racist things about Indians, and I literally went up to him and I said, "You're not allowed to talk to me like that," and I walked out of the room. And the teacher was like, "Whoa, what happened?" But that's not okay. You can't say any of that, and you think that I'm this small Indian girl who's gonna just take that. I'm not. I'm gonna say what I have to say. I'm gonna throw that back in your face because it's not okay.
I think the fact that we all have a story to tell, and that we've all been through so many things in life, and you never know who has what going on in their lives. You could pass someone on the street and their mother could have passed away just that day, and you wouldn't even know.
Well, Cassandra is still getting to know Cassandra.
I would say that Yusra is willing to help, that I'm always here if anyone needs me, and that I'm willing to fight a fight for justice. I'm so ready to help people believe in themselves, to be okay, to be accepted in this world, because that's what everyone deserves.
Shay Lewis is different from the next man and woman that you'll encounter. Shay Lewis is unique, but Shay Lewis is not unique in the sense that I have existed prior to my ability to categorize who I am and understand who I am.
I want you to say that Sean Holland is safe. I think that when people get a little bit more comfortable, we can get to someplace. But I want people to know that I'm safe and that the conversation is safe with me.
Kayla Merrow is a child of God. I am a Christian woman first and foremost, and I'll put that before anything in my life. I'll put that before I say I'm Filipino, I'm American, I'm brown, I am white. I'll put that before anything like that. I put God first, I put Jesus first.
The first thing that jumped to me was Joseph is human. Joseph is a part of this community.
What I want people to know about me, Damian Campbell, is that Damian Campbell is a mixture of so many things. I do not want to be labeled as one specific thing. I might be a bit of this and a bit of that too. I'm an individual. I'm a human being. I'm part of the human race. Get to know me.
First sentence, Muyi Ali is beautiful. If I need to elaborate on that, like physically, like thank you for noticing, that's very true. But on the inside, I want to be so beautiful that other people want to be, not necessarily be me, but be beautiful too and be beautiful to other people, because we are one. We go back and forth.